So I had some high expectations, and I sat down to watch it, and totally open mind. Obviously anticipatory. I wanted to see it, but I sat down with an open mind, and I gotta tell you, it was phenomenal. It was spectacular. Like, don't think I'm overstating that. It was a work of genius. It was so compelling, so well plotted. Like, the story starts like immediately. Like, there is very little drag. And when there's not actually like story beats happening, the dialogue is tremendous. Like, Colin Farrell as the Penguin is mesmerizing. I can't see Colin Farrell under the makeup. I believe it's him because they've told me it's him, but I don't see that it's him. It's a spectacular performance. He's playing this, if you've probably seen the Batman movie, but he's playing this version of like a kind of a stereotypical like Italian sort of Chicago style gangster. It's really fascinating because he has all these little mannerisms and little deliveries of like kind of like mobby type dudes that I knew from Jersey. Like, just the way they talk and these little subtle sense of humor, but the way they kind of pop out, the way he carries his head, the way he like touches his hair, it's remarkable. It is one of the best performances that I've seen in recent memory. I genuinely don't remember the last time I've seen a performance where it's like I'm so, on one hand, so captivated by how completely he encapsulates the character, but also how much I'm invested in him as the character and the story. So it's like two things are happening at the same time where I'm just like, God, that's incredible. But also he's carrying the story. It's not one of those like vanity pieces. Like there's definitely roles, like acting roles that actors take that are just basically like act. And like, it's great and everything, but you're not all that invested in the story. The movie could be kind of memorable. Not the case with this show. I am blown away by how compelling it is, how well plotted it is, how each scene logically flows into the next one, how it moves so swiftly but also takes its time in between beats. It's brilliant. Like, it's absolutely brilliant. Like, there's no fault I've seen. I can't think of anything that stands out to me as something that I even in the moment was like, eh. Like, at one point I literally paused it to go get a glass of water, but I was like relieved from a break in the tension. Like, it was that taut. I'm not going to spoil it because it literally just came out over the weekend. I will just say it takes place like directly after the end of the Batman movie, like seamlessly. Like, it's basically, it starts off with a news montage of the Riddler's destruction of Gotham and all the things that happened when he opened the levees and how the water flooded into the city and all the destruction. And it's really like, it's like very ominous, and it takes it seriously. It takes like what happened seriously and builds on it. It doesn't try to like just ignore it. It's like, okay, now there's like a big power vacuum with this Falcone guy dead. And it's beautifully shot with the Penguin just like staring out at the city in this big window. And it's kind of like putting all of the themes and the future of the show sort of like on him, like in his eyes and like over the news montage. And it starts off like, I don't even really want to say much more than that, other than it just picks up right where it left off. And then a gigantic story beat happens within the first, 10 minutes, it feels like. And then the whole show's kind of like moved from that point forward. And it's so rich. The characters are so good. Everyone you meet is a rich 360-degree person with like flaws or strengths, like characteristics. Like the girl, so there's Falcone. I don't know how much this was established in the movie because I barely remember that movie. I just remember some of the more ridiculous parts of it and the fact that I felt like it was too long, but yet there were good parts and I thought it was compelling and, a good watch. Not a masterpiece, something I'll probably never go back to rewatch, but was, for when I watched it, fine, acceptable. But Falcone, I guess, had 2 kids, I think, a son and a daughter. And the daughter, I don't know if this was established in the movie, but in the show, she just gets out of Arkham. And she is played by Kristen Milotti. She is so good. She plays like the daughter who just gets out of Arkham. And when you meet her, she's intimidating, like truly. There's just a stillness to her and like a wackiness in her eyes. And for the episode, like I said, I want to avoid spoilers as much as I can, but she's definitely an intimidating character. And she seems like a villainous character, but it kind of seems like everyone's a villain. So it's hard to kind of pin down who's the villain. But she feels like one of the more villainous characters, and it's really earned. She's clearly nuts, which is, kind of uneasy. She's also powerful. She comes from this rich, powerful family, so she has the resources to execute some of her manic tendencies, which is scary. I mean, chicks are nuts. Take a truly nuts chick, then give her money and power. Yeah, that's a scary person. But it in no way does it feel like Hollywood with the strong female character at all. It's a character, right? It's like the way it used to be, where you didn't notice it. You weren't like, oh, there's a chick in this. All right, what do we got? It's like, no, it's a seamless, The thing is, this doesn't feel like a superhero show at all. This just feels like a crime story set in Gotham, which is weird, I think. Now, that might be a good thing, right? Because to me, it kind of rings like Daredevil a little bit, but better, like more grounded, more like rich and like real. But there's no hint of, I don't even think Batman's been mentioned. The Riddler is treated like a terrorist, which, I guess in modern context, he would be a terrorist. But it's just kind of like, there doesn't feel like there's the rogues gallery around. It doesn't feel like there's any other villains except for just the people that are in this series, which are like crime bosses and rival gangs and so on and so forth. Like, it kind of feels a little bit like, I heard a critique or an observation or a thesis about how the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix was really just a different script that they sort of repackaged with the Joker theme. That it would have been its own movie, but, superhero stuff is so hot right now and it sells and so on and so forth. They kind of reworked it to be a Joker origin story. This feels like that a little bit. It kind of feels like they're telling a really compelling, taught, like brilliantly written, acted, shot, directed crime story that they're being like about the Penguin, because comic book stuff, I could see being like a really big Batman fan and kind of not loving that. I'm not a particularly big Batman fan. I like it. I'm not against it. I liked the animated series when I was a kid. I watched the movies. I've detailed my problems with the Nolan films many a time here, and I think they're far from perfect, so at least from a writing standpoint. God, so there's some stupid choices in those movies, but it kind of feels like they're stealing the superhero branding and the superhero marketing for the sake of being able to make a good show, because there's already a captive audience. And technically the character of Penguin exists, from the movie universe. So it feels like, like if this were to tie in with other villains in the DC universe and Batman was out there, even if you don't see him, if he's just spoken about or shown in news clips or something, I think that would be a little bit more respectful to fans of Batman. But like, regardless, it's a brilliant, brilliant show. I just kind of hope that like at some point you're not just like, it almost feels like a bait and switch in a way, but it's such a good switch that, you know, it should probably be forgiven. But if you're a big Batman fan and you want to, you know, see a Penguin movie, you know, what's a villain without a hero? You know, like what's a hero without a villain? Like they kind of need to coexist. So I'm curious to see how it plays out. There's no way I'm not watching every episode of this show unless it takes a huge nosedive. But based on the pilot, I'm in. I am so in.
This is the future.